Hi, I'll continue with paragraph 9 of the chapter on the brace from Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach's Versuch über die wahre Art, das Klavier zu spielen. Aus der Betrachtung, dass diese Manier in der Kürze die Stelle eines ordentlichen Trillers mit dem Nachschlage vertritt, kann man schon eine nähere Einsicht in den rechten Gebrauch dieses Doppelschlages kriegen. Bach says the brace can substitute for the regular trill with an afterstroke in der Kürze, and that would be in a short or condensed space of time, or in abbreviation. And he says, from this point of view, one can indeed, or already, get a closer understanding of how one properly uses it. One could picture Bach here standing, let's say, in front of a class in a classroom, saying, so, if you were all paying attention to what I said about the regular trill with the afterstroke, you'll already have a better idea of how to properly use the brace, while looking expectantly at the class. Well, if we were the ones in that classroom, I'd be nodding like you'd all be nodding, looking as well like a deer caught in the headlights, like a babe in the petrified wood. Because on the inside, in that moment, I'd be drawing a complete blank when trying to think of exactly what it was he said. And I'd be sweating a brick that he might think of singling one of us out to stand up and repeat for him and for everybody what that was. Because that someone could be me. So, as an act of mercy to us all, I thought I'd recap a little by reading paragraphs 13 and 14 and the appendix to paragraph 13 and paragraph 18 from the chapter on trills, where Bach is talking about the regular trill with an afterstroke. Then, when he touches on some of those points, again in the upcoming paragraphs, it'll be easier to connect them to those earlier paragraphs. Connecting paragraphs can narrow down fundamental or core elements or ideas and help us recognize the variation that exists around them. And such practice can lead to a better understanding of the different kinds of notation, for example, and how they all tie in with each other. What variations can make a distinction and stop one thing being something else. That is why I'm adding paragraph 18 to those paragraphs, even though it might not be directly related to the brace. I add it for the sake of consideration or wonder, and for the sake of creating a bigger picture. You never know what connections might lie hidden, what understanding there might be to be gained. One more thing before I read. Another advantage of calling this ornament the brace, besides it better describing that what it is that what I'm calling the afterstroke at the end of the trill, which I'd say would probably generally be referred to as the turn at the end of the trill, that in my world could simply be called the turn, since it wouldn't be confused with what I call the brace. So instead of having to say the cumbersome turn at the end of a trill, when Bach talks about the trill with a Nachschlag, so as to make a distinction to the ornament that is called the turn, one could simply say the trill with a turn, without running the risk of confusion, because said ornament in my world would be called the brace. So another argument. Nachschlag, however, would still be a better term given its adaptability. So while I could say the trill with a turn, I couldn't scrap afterstroke entirely because the trill with a turn would be too specific. For example, the figure following the first angeschlossene Trill or connected trill in the first movement of Beethoven's Appassionata that takes the place of the turn could be referred to by Bach, were he to talk about it, as a Nachschlag. And if you look at it, you can see you can't call that a turn. It's different, it takes the place of the turn. But it would still be referred to as, potentially would be referred to as the Nachschlag. So the trill with a turn would be relating to that, those two notes, the note below and the note itself, that end a turn. And it would apply just to that alone. So afterstroke would apply to the, for example, to the bit following the angeschlossene Trill or the connected trill in that opening of Beethoven's, the first movement of Beethoven's Appassionata Sonata. That would be the afterstroke. Yeah. Der Triller über einer Note, welche etwas lang ist, sie mag hinauf oder heruntergehen, hat allezeit einen Nachschlag. Wenn nach der Note mit dem Triller ein Sprung folgt, Figur 27a, so findet der Nachschlag auch statt. Wenn die Noten kurz sind, so leidet ihn eine drauffolgende steigende Sekunde allezeit eher B als eine fallende C. Da bei ganz langsamer Zeitmaß folgende Arten Noten D einen Nachschlag vertragen, ungeachtet die geschwinde Folge nach den Punkten die Stelle eines Nachschlags vertreten könnte, so sieht man hieraus, dass bloß eine fallende Sekunde diesem Nachschlage am meisten zuwider ist. Die Ausführung dieses Exempels D mit Nachschlägen werden wir im folgenden Paragraph bei Gelegenheit der punktierten Noten deutlich ersehen. Es ist indessen keine notwendige Schuldigkeit, bei diesem letzteren Exempel Nachschläge zu machen, wenn man nur den Triller gehörig aushält. Ein Triller ohne folgende Noten, zum Exempel am Ende, über einer Fermate und so weiter, hat allezeit einen Nachschlag. Punktierte Noten, worauf eine Kürze im Hinaufgehen folgt, leiden auch Triller mit dem Nachschlage E. Anstatt dass sonst die letzte Note von dem Nachschlage allezeit in der größten Geschwindigkeit mit der folgenden verbunden wird, F. So geschieht dieses bei punktierten Noten nicht, weil ein ganz kleiner Raum zwischen der letzten Note des Nachschlags und der folgenden bleiben muss, G. Dieser Raum muss nur so viel betragen, dass man kaum hören kann, dass der Nachschlag und die folgende Note zwei abgesonderte Dinge sind. Da dieser Raum mit der Zeitmasse ein Verhältnis hat, so ist die bei G befindliche Ausführung, allwo die Schwänzung der letzten Note des Nachschlags diesen Raum andeutet, nur so ungefähr abgebildet. Es rührt dieses von dem Vortrage der punktierten Noten, wovon in dem letzten Hauptstücke gehandelt werden wird, her. Vermöge dessen, die auf die Punkte folgenden Kürzen, allezeit kürzer als die Schreibart erfordert, abgefertigt werden. Die bei H befindliche Verbindung des Nachschlags mit der folgenden Note ist also falsch. Es muss ein Komponist, wenn diese Art von Ausführung verlangt, solches ausdrücklich andeuten. In sehr geschwinder Zeitmaße kann man zuweilen durch Vorschläge die Ausnahme eines Trillers bequem bewerkstelligen. Figur 29. Die letzten zwei kurzen Noten drücken alsdann den Nachschlag nicht übel aus. Da dieser Doppelschlag die allermeiste Zeit geschwinde gemacht und die oberste Note nach der schon angeführten Art geschnellt wird, so begeht man einen Fehler, wenn man bei einer langen Note statt des ordentlichen Trillers den Doppelschlag gebraucht, weil diese Note, welche durch den Triller ausgefüllt werden sollte, hierdurch zu leer bleibt. Here in paragraph 10, we already have Bach mentioning for a second time that the brace is performed quickly in the large majority of cases. In paragraph 2 he said the same, weil die allermeiste Zeit hurtig ausgeführt wird. I'll read now from paragraph 8 from the chapter on trills, where Bach talks about this manner of hastening the upper note. While I'm at it, I'll include paragraph 7, since they seem to very much go together. There's a clue to that in paragraph 32. Also, I'll incorporate the appendix to paragraph 8 into the paragraph there where Bach indicates it to be inserted. And I discuss all these paragraphs in detail in the corresponding videos on my channel, and there you can as well hear me play the examples so you can hear what they sound like. So if you I'm just giving you a recap here, so I'll just read them and I won't discuss them. Die Triller sind die schwerste Manier. Allen wollen sie nicht gelingen. Man muss sie in der Jugend fleißig üben. Ihr Schlag muss vor allen Dingen gleich und geschwinde sein. Ein geschwinder Triller ist allezeit einem langsamen vorzuziehen. Bei traurigen Stücken könnte ein Triller allenfalls etwas langsamer geschlagen werden. Außerdem aber erhebt der Triller, wenn geschwind ist, einen Gedanken sehr. In der Stärke und Schwäche richtet man sich nach dem Gedanken, wobei vorkommt. Es mag dieser Forte oder Piano vorgetragen werden. Man hebt bei dessen Übung die Finger nicht zu hoch und einen wie den anderen auf. Man macht ihn anfangs ganz langsam und hernach immer etwas hurtiger, aber allezeit gleich. Die Nerven müssen hier ebenfalls schlapp sein, sonst kommt ein meckernder, ungleicher Triller heraus. Mancher will ihn dadurch erzwingen. Bei der Übung muss man in der Geschwindigkeit nicht eher weiterschreiten, als bis der Schlag völlig gleich ist. Diese Vorschrift merke man bei der Übung schwerer und dabei geschwinder Passagen ebenfalls, damit sie mit der gehörigen Leichtigkeit und Deutlichkeit vorgetragen werden. Durch diese vernünftige Übung erhält man gar leicht dasjenige ganz gewiss, was sich niemals durch eine übertriebene Anstrengung der Nerven erzwingen lässt. Der höchste Ton bei den Trillern, wenn zum letzten Mal vorkommt, wird geschnellt. Das ist, dass man nach diesem Anschlage die Spitze des auf das geschwindeste ganz krumm eingebogenen Fingers auf das hörtigste von der Taste zurückzieht und abgleiten lässt. So, and again, I discuss them in more detail in the corresponding videos. These are concepts too difficult for mediocrity to comprehend. So it'll attack them and eradicate them and post a video or give a lesson on rotation or the perfect finger exercise instead. That's why you'll have never heard of it in your lessons or on YouTube. They eradicate them so these things cease to exist. And you'll see countless videos on how to play trills, how to perfect trills, all that, and you'll never hear about the hastening of the uppermost note when it comes forth for the last time. It's because they can't comprehend it, they don't understand it, so they get rid of it. Besides Bach beginning to expand on the point he introduced in the last paragraph, so he says, you already get a better understanding of its use, and so he's expanding on that now in these paragraphs. It could be that we can connect what Bach says here to what he is going to say in some upcoming paragraphs, and to what I said is food for thought regarding Mozart's earlier sonatas. Who he's talking to and where are they coming from? Those people from paragraph 7. So I just say that it probably doesn't make any sense now, but it'll relate to the next group of paragraphs that I'll be looking at. Also, it could seem that Bach is referring to his opening paragraph 13 from the chapter on trills with a mention of notes that are somewhat long. That trills over such notes, whether they ascend or descend, always have an afterstroke. So it could be that he's referring to his opening of paragraph 13. So it would be him speaking, explaining to those paying attention, those who are on his wavelength, because they look back to remind themselves, because he's looking back at it too. I'd like to use the word synchronicity here. We get to look behind the scenes. So if Bach is writing these paragraphs that we're looking at now, looking back at that paragraph 13 and referring to it and connecting those two, that is sort of happening eternally, because every time those are read, that is what is being done beyond the words. And so when we do the same, we're actually we are connecting to Bach on a level beyond just the mere reading of the words. We are engaging in the exact same activity he's engaging in. And that's why I'd use synchronicity. And so we get to look behind the scenes. It's a glimpse of more than what's presented. And we can understand why he says what he says in the upcoming paragraphs. The order. So, why does he say about notes now that are somewhat long? Because the first thing he mentioned in that paragraph 13, and the first thing he knows, anybody who looks back who's curious and looks back to find out, the first thing they'll be told about is that a note that's long that has a trill will always have an afterstroke. So, there's lots to be of insight to be gained connecting those two and thinking of them side by side. I would also propose that Bach is essentially saying here, if one were to read between the lines, that to play the brace, like the roll of honor play and teach it in Beethoven's Tempest Sonata, for example, is wrong. What happens if one was to fill out a long note with a brace? The brace will be slow. And the longer the note, the slower the brace. And the brace in the Tempest Sonata, as it's taught and performed by Lilliput and the Roll of Honor, is extremely slow. And did Beethoven add that brace in order to fill out the note? Are words like luster and lustrous words one can't apply to Beethoven? Are they words one has no business using when describing Beethoven? A word like lustrous. The other thing is, call something a turn that is not at all a turn, and it'll start to become a turn. That's the danger of incorrectly naming something. It becomes that. And turns are never quick. By nature, turns are slow. If somebody, asks you for directions, stops their car and asks you for directions, and you tell them, yeah, you go down the street and you turn right, you're not going to imagine them, shooting round that corner. What you'll imagine them is driving up to where the turn is, slowing down, putting the car into second, and then taking the turn. That's a turn. And so you call it something, you give it an incorrect name. People start to identify, make the wrong associations. Ich muss bei dieser Gelegenheit einer Ausnahme gedenken, welche sich ereignet, wenn man in langsamem Tempo wegen des Effekts sowohl bei dem Schlusse, Figur 52, als auch außerdem nach einem Vorschlage von unten, A, statt des Trillers einen leisen Doppelschlag macht, indem man die letzte Note davon so lange unterhält, bis die folgende eintritt. So Bach says a quiet brace. He doesn't say anything about it being slow. He calls the tempo slow. And one can notice in his writing out of the ornaments in figure 52 that this hastening of the uppermost note is observed. Just as an extra thing. When one looks at the slurs, and as well, I would consider what Bach said in paragraph 7 of the chapter on Appoggiaturas. Ferner lernen wir aus dieser Abbildung zugleich ihren Vortrag, in dem alle Vorschläge stärker als die folgende Note samt ihren Zieraten angeschlagen und an diese gezogen werden. Es mag nun der Bogen dabei stehen oder nicht. The functioning illiterate will not read the slur mark implied in figure 52a between the E appoggiatura from below and the F. That is actual functioning illiteracy and is but a minor example of it. It's like a narrow glimpse of a panoramic, but it is an example of it. Furthermore, one could wonder why the first example has a slur and that in A doesn't. So just as well for your own exploration, you can think of that. So when one looks at the slurs in the how it's to be performed parts of the example and considers what Bach says about one holding out the last note of the brace so long till the following comes in, this could be something he might be telling you if he was giving you a lesson about the proper performance of slurs. And I'll mention it now as a little sneak peek or precursor, that when Bach talks about the performance of slurs, and we'll get to that later, one will be able to connect this bit of information to that. Yeah, so a word from Bach there on performance and interpretation for anyone who'd care to notice. And I'm happy to think that there are, people who care to notice. I would wonder what the actual percentage is of the roll of honour that play and teach slurs incorrectly. I've only encountered them taught wrong, so from my own personal experience I'd have to say 100%. At least I'd have to say I never had the correct way, the one that exists outside of the cage, pointed out to me. A lot of very famous pieces have been very negatively influenced as a result of this percentage, where once they know better, would look back at how they're being done and cringe. And then they'd look at the roll of honour with new eyes and think, how could that have been anything but cringe? But I'll get to that eventually. Yeah, so, we are talking about, when we talk about Bach, Mozart and Beethoven, we're talking about geniuses. We're not talking about people who sound like goons or are totally like nerds or I don't know what the word is, just they wouldn't sound like people with no taste. They'd be cool. They'd be great. It would sound like, yeah, that's it. That's the way it's meant to sound. It can't sound any different. And it would be, it would have a presence. It would have a maturity, a grown-up thing. They wouldn't be some clown jumping around. Doing things that only, that place it in a sort of a nerdy category that lacks sort of social grace or whatever you call that. So a lot of pieces that are much better than anybody knows them have been ruined by nobody knowing how to properly perform slurs. It's ridiculous. And they'll be giving masterclasses, talk, high profile people, and educating others, having no clue themselves, and eventually that will be seen. In the light of that last part of the sentence, in that one holds out the last note of the brace so long till the following comes in, together with the end of paragraph 10, because this note, which via the trill should be filled out, would hereby remain too empty. One could as well wonder what the slur might have to do with a note having to be filled out via a trill. One can see from what Bach says that the notes, the G in figure 52 and the F in 52A, still have to be full, despite the substitution of the brace for the trill. Plus, the note is not filled out by the brace being slow. Yeah, so the thing is, you can already get a clue as to how to perform the slur from what Bach says there. When you know, thanks to me pointing out that it's a slur he's talking about, it's just that what you'll get later is, it fully explained, so you won't be in any doubt. And this again, it's just a wonder. I say that about, to think about, what would the slur, what might that have to do with a note having to be filled out via a trill. Also in figure 31 from paragraph 20 of the chapter on trills, when Bach says that among the mistakes of which trills are the innocent cause, to begin with we discover this, in that many will burden the first of those notes shown at figure 31 with a trill, regardless that the slurs, bows, generally placed over these passages should prevent this. So when Bach says that, one could notice that the note in question in each of figure 31's examples is at the beginning of the slur. That is just a further detail that can be noticed. Again, in the spirit of connecting the information and sharpening one's picture. But before any conclusions are drawn, it is important to remember that I am the Lord your God. You shall not have false gods before me. So don't make a conclusion, the one true God, if it's a false God, because it's only going to hold you back. If you hold a false God for the one true God, you're going to find yourself in a situation that becomes the exception. And it's only it's false gods that mean, the one true God you'll always be led to the right answer with the one true God, where the false God, you'll end up doing the wrong thing in that exception. Yeah, and I don't mean that in a religious sense. It's like, I see this as a way that commandment was how a wisdom was communicated, and that wisdom of thinking of the one true God and not putting false gods before me. I think that's like a great piece of wisdom in terms of that is how one progresses, advances. It's like I might have said this before, a physicist or something. Let's say there's a constant that they have, like the speed of light. And let's say that's incorrect. Well, when they do their equations and calculations, if they include an incorrect speed of light, all their calculations will end up being wrong. But if they find out their incorrect speed of light is if they spot it as the false God, and then they find the one true God, which is the correct speed of light, all of a sudden those same calculations will work out. So it is the key to advancement, that. And when I think of it, just something extra, only the one true God can say that. It is brilliant, I think, that commandment, or the way it's presented, because it's only the one true God who can say such a thing. Because if you think, let's say, in religious terms, like if you take it literally and think, so this is from the Bible, and then the church teaches the Bible, and so then the church's God is the one true God, and he says you can't follow any other gods. But let's say, and in that commandment there's an implication to like what's implied in that commandment is that we have to search for the one true God. You know, he says, I am the one true God, but who is that saying that? It's the one true God saying that. And who is the one true God? It's up to us to search for him. We can't assume. And let's say somebody searched for the one true God and found the one true God. And then it turned out, like, just for the sake of argument, the God of the Bible or the Catholic Church, it turned out that that was a false God. Well, the person will have found that out by obeying that commandment. So that commandment, even though like the God of the Bible turns out to be a false God, that commandment stays true, because it is in following that commandment that that God of the Bible was replaced by the one true God. So that's how it's you know, it can't be, it'll always be relevant. Oh, and only the one true God can say such a thing. Nobody else can say it, because it'll always end up at the very end when the truth is found, and one can, there's nowhere further that needs to be gone. It can only have come out of the mouth of whatever the truth is. It's only the truth that can say that. Yeah. So it's good to keep what Bach says here in mind, because you never know when you will encounter such a situation. Potentially it could already be hiding in plain sight, staring you right in the face, being the solution to what, without it, might be seen as an extremely difficult situation devoid of any effect. Cue paragraph 7 from the chapter on ornaments in general. And I can und hoffe durch alles dieses, das hier und da eingewurzelte falsche Vorurteil von der Notwendigkeit der überhäuften bunten Noten bei dem Klavierspielen ziemlich aus dem Wege zu räumen. And it would be important to remember that Bach specified that it happens after an appoggiatura from below. So in the two examples, the F in figure 52 and the E in 52A, both are appoggiaturas from below, and the same rules apply to both. Also, by writing in the piano, Bach is implying here the forte. So in 52A, what the functioning illiterate would not see or understand would be a forte sign, a piano sign, a slur, and the proper performance of that slur. And that what we see in 52A is an Einschnitt, or a cut. Okay, I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll pick up where I left off in the next video. Thanks. Bye.